Ding dong, the witch is dead. Vivi is banned in standard. And not to be outdone, our other favourite 3-mana power creep Mistake was also banned in yet another format alongside it. All that and more in today's video as a very sick PleasantKenobi talks with some vocal fry and some rasp. I hope you like it. If you're looking to treat yourself to some avatar boosters in Europe, then go to magicmadhouse.co.uk and use the code KENOBI-AVATAR to get a discount on your Play Booster box. This code is valid until the 20th, available for all pre-orders of Play Boosters at magicmadhouse.co.uk. And my North American sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, continue to be an incredible support for the channel. Use the code KENOBI at checkout to get 5% off your order, and it helps support the show. Cool stuff in stock. Let's take a look at the bans, what was said, and what I feel about them. I only have feelings about a couple of them. That's not true. I always have feelings and opinions about Magic. That's kind of what I do. In standard, Vivi Ornatia, Screaming Nemesis, and Proph's Edictic Memory were banned. Vivi was clearly going to be banned. Either that or they're going to ban Cauldron and catch a lot of flack for doing so. Vivi is the titular card from the Vivi Cauldron deck that has dominated the format for the best part of 6 months. Vivi is an oppressive and powerful Magic the Gathering card that has basically usurped or gone over the top of every other deck in the format, essentially. Vivi ended up being over 50% of the field of both the last 2 standard spotlights, and it's been so oppressive and so powerful that it's not really worth playing anything else other than perhaps Mono Red. We'll come to that more in a moment. And that's led to a incestuous meta game that people don't like playing and are very unhappy about. This has led to tournament attendance being down and arena play numbers, I'm assuming, being down. The Wizards won't tell us. The fact that it's gone on for 6 months of a 50% metagame share and one of the highest win rates, if not the highest win rate in the format as well. Obviously, it's a bit difficult to figure out the exact win rate because I guess they're playing each other a lot. Math. But the fact that we had this go on for 6 months, the original point the Wizards made was they didn't want to knock the confidence of people that bought into Vivi, which is funny because, like, ultimately in taking this fucking long to respond, you upset everyone who didn't buy into Vivi, which is approximately 50% of the field. Or it's actually a larger percentage for the people that didn't buy into anything because they didn't see a point in playing. 50% of the field is Vivi, 50% of the field is not Vivi. Math. But then there's a larger margin of people that either stopped playing standard, didn't bother buying into a deck, or considered playing standard and decided not to. That's probably what I kind of come into. I made some videos a little while back saying how standard got quite good recently. It's quite fun. And then I've made no standard content since. Well, not since, but since the release of Final Fantasy, because the Vivi deck is ass. And by that, I don't mean ass as in, like, I don't think the actual play patterns of the Vivi deck are that unfun. There are much more unfun play patterns around in Magic, especially amongst the cards I'm going to talk about today, like Nadu, for example. But I mean ass as in, like, it's unbeatable with other decks, and thus it dominates the format and makes the game a 1 or 2 deck format, which sucks. Wizards went as far as to admit that standard has been in poor shape for the past few months. And is it Cauldron and Vivi are responsible for? And I think really my big takeaway from this is that it took them way too fucking long to take action. Like, essentially, Magic the Gathering is struggling to regain some of its former competitive loftiness or the appeal of competitive Magic for the grinders and the spikes of yesteryear, the people that I knew who I came up with playing Magic in the UK who no longer play. They play Flesh and Blood and other card games. And part of that issue with that player base, those old school spikes, is some of them don't like Universes Beyond, some don't like Power Creep. There's like a lot of like small things, Commander, the commandification of Magic. There's lots of small elements that all compound to create enough weight to break the back of a metaphorical camel and then no longer play Magic. And one of the parts to that weight is this, it's ban cadence. It's how regularly you ban things. The writer of the article, Carmen Compounds, did go on to explain that they want to acknowledge that this year's cadence for bans and restrict announcements has not been ideal for competitive standard, going as far as to say it's suffered for it and it's caused pain. So the takeaway from that, what they've said, is that they're going to stick to their guns of having regular, structured banning announcements, so we know when it's coming to create a predictable rhythm, but they're going to just make more of them and do it more regularly. And I think that's a step in the right direction, so I applaud them for that. The real elephant in the room is, why did it take so long for them to commit to banning Vivi? Of course, they gave us that line about user confidence, but Vivi mirrors the One Ring in it taking far too long and the entire community basically coming to a completely unanimous decision. Even the players who bought into the decks playing them know that these cards need to go, and Wizards of the Coast span their wheels, dragged their feet, and they didn't bother banning them in a timely fashion. I'm going to make the assumption that there is not a contractual obligation for them to have the 5-month window, whatever it's been for Vivi, where they can't ban things from Final Fantasy. I'm assuming there's no contractual obligation, but I would make the assumption that a meeting was had at some point where they discussed how bad it looks to the share and stakeholders, the third-party companies, the second-party companies that are involved with Universes Beyond, the people who are giving them their licenses, how bad it looked to those people, those individuals, those companies, if they were to see their prized possessions, their Clouds, their Sephiroths, and their Vivis banned early. I don't want to believe that's what's happened, and that's why it's been such a slow and piss-poor response from them, but it does look suspicious regardless of what you actually believe. The optics are bad. That's 2 instances of Universes Beyond cards being incredibly pushed, and I don't think that Universes Beyond is what causes them to be pushed. For example, Nardu was very pushed too, but Nardu was banned in a much quicker fashion. That's the bit I find strange, and the bit that I'm sure we'll come back to and discuss again further down the line as we see more cards from these sets that miss the mark, are too powerful, need to go, and I hope Wizards just act a lot quicker next time. As for the other bans, Screaming Nemesis is basically the best card in Mono Red. I say this even though some Mono Red decks aren't necessarily playing it, but the problem with Screaming Nemesis is that as a red card, as we see here in Standard and in Cube, is that it has it turns off the counterplay to aggro. Not only does life gain no longer work, but just blocking their creatures with bigger creatures because you ramped is also now no longer an option. Screaming Nemesis turns off both elements of counterplay, and that being counterplay turned off for one of the better decks in the format, the other deck they admittedly, or Wizards admit, could go toe-to-toe with Vivi in terms of power level, seems like a bad thing, and thus they wanted to hit something from the deck, and they picked Screaming Nemesis to be that thing to be hit. Portals of Addicting Memory is interesting. It almost feels like they're still scared that blue-red tempo will still be too good, even with the loss of Vivi, although we must admit that Addicting Memory can be played in other like shells as well. They compare it to Up the Beanstalk for being an engine card that replaces itself, which I think is interesting because I don't think this card is even remotely as powerful as Up the Beanstalk, but I do think it is comparable in the sense that it does replace itself, which means that if it is a powerful card, regardless of whether it's even remotely in the same ballpark as Up the Beanstalk, it does have that element of like, even if you deal with it, you're still down a card. I think it's super interesting that they didn't bother to ban anything from like Simic, blue-black, mid-range, the blue-white aggro deck that won an event recently against Vivi, by the way. I think it got lucky. But either way, there are other decks in the format that may now rise to be the top, and they haven't looked new to those. Another one that I've seen people complain about is Kona, the creature that puts Omniscience into play on turn 4. Not the best play pattern. I generally think Omniscience being in the format might just be a general mistake. Either way, I think it's interesting they're going to let those decks sort of like have some breathing room to see what does come to the top. The preemptive bans are both around the blue-red deck, as much as I can tell, and mono-red Screaming Nemesis. Sure, I think these bans are good, and I look forward to actually trying to play some Standard again and seeing how it feels now that we don't have to just like play into the fucking Vivi decks as they spin their wheels and masturbate in the corner. In Pioneer, they banned Heartfire Hero because their stats behind the scenes are showing them that in best of 3 and best of 1 on Arena, the Pioneer deck that has the biggest showing in terms of metagame percentage and win rate is mono red, and Heartfire Hero is an easy pick to get rid of one of the problem cards from that, one of the best 1-drops in that deck. I think it's safe to say that Wizards of the Coast have gone way too fucking far on printing incredibly powerful and incredibly pushed like red and red aggressive creatures in the last couple of years. Like when you look at like the stuff that Burn and aggro decks used to play in like the older formats and in Cube only 5 years ago, and nowadays we've got like fucking Gut, we've got Inti, we've got fucking Heartfire Hero, Screaming Nemesis. Like the power creep in that particular like archetype feels more severe than others, although I guess you've got like fucking the Guide of Souls and Ocelot and stuff, so maybe I'm talking complete shit. Maybe even the token white weenie decks got power crept up to shit. Either way, it's very clear that some of these mono red decks, I guess Monstrous Rage is another example of this. Some of the mono red cards are so absurd that they have to get banned across multiple formats. That's really funny to me. No changes in Modern, with the Modern Pro Tour recently being won by Belcher. I think this is probably the right thing to do, whilst a Pro Tour was won by Belcher, which might sound like a sign of an unhealthy format. The metagame was actually very, very diverse. I think I covered this in a video before, so this seems good to me. Legacy had 2 interesting bans. The first of which is Nardu, a card that The problem with Nadu is that its win rate is a lot higher than it looks, and its play rate is a lot higher than it looks, but no one wants to fucking play the deck on Magic the Gathering Online, because taking through the combo, or even clicking through just a value engine version of it within another shell, is just fucking awful. So Nadu gets to fly under the radar more so than they did in Modern. Although we saw this in Modern a little bit too. Like the online data didn't quite show how good Nadu was before we hit the Pro Tour, because people just weren't enjoying playing it on Modo, or were losing games by timing out by playing it. Either way, good riddance to bad rubbish. It's just funny to see it take so long to get there compared to when it did in Modern. And then we have like a pillar of the format. Entomb plus Reanimate is like the central engine of reanimating decks, the reanimator decks in Legacy, whether that be old school mono black, maybe 6-7 years ago the red black versions, or more commonly blue black, backed up by dazes and other permissions and cantrips. There's been talk in the past about getting rid of Reanimate, because basically Reanimator tends to be one of the best decks in every format. I mean, blue black Reanimator was probably the best deck to play Psychic Frog in before that was banned. But instead they've gone for Entomb, which I kind of like. I think Reanimate is way more iconic and way more interesting a spell than Entomb. Entomb is a tutor too, which makes your games like more consistent. I think going for the card that does the thing more so than the tutor is better. Also, like, interacting with a reanimate, like they reanimate a thing and you get rid of it, that's great. If someone entombs something, it makes every single reanimation spell after the fact a problem. So the entomb is actually a thing that you tended to want to interact with, or at least I did. Maybe that was the incorrect way of looking at it when I was playing a lot of Legacy. Either way, I do think this is the right hit. And I think it's long overdue. The alternatives were hitting a Reanimate or Daze, but they feel so much more like pillars of the format that I think they couldn't hit them. I think Entomb is the safer one. Like that and Animate Dead, I guess, were the two options that didn't feel like you were gutting Legacy of part of its identity. And of course, if you don't get rid of Daze, you can allow Delver to exist. And we all know Wizards have got someone there has got a soft spot for that deck. In Pauper, High Tide was banned. Which is pretty interesting. They referred to this as a trial unban. They didn't know if it would be good. A good idea to take off the ban list, and now it's back on the ban list. So yeah, they tried something interesting with a fringe format, and again, I quite like this. I think it's also doable in Pauper because the majority of the cards are so cheap, you aren't buying into a very expensive deck, and then find out your deck has been banned again. And they were upfront about this being a trial in the first place. This seems good too. Historic has some cards pre-banned: Force Negation, Frantic Search, Mystical Tutor, Entomb, and Dark Depths. Some people are going to be pissed off about this stuff. These are all cards that are on the bonus sheets for Avatar, by the way. That's why they're pre-banned. The interesting thing about Arena is that they're available in Timeless. So I actually quite like removing the higher power level bonus sheet stuff from the Eternal Card pool of Historic, for example, and then letting it breathe and live in Timeless. I think it gives the two formats a different identity each, and that's a good thing. I say that, but I don't really play Historic. I'll play Pioneer or Timeless, but again, I think it's good to have formats that have a different identity. All of those cards, aforementioned cards, are playable in Timeless, and they mentioned Strip Mine as like the only card they've really considered affecting in Timeless, but I also agree with them not to remove Strip Mine or any of the cards I'm about to talk about for Brawl from Timeless, because I think Timeless is a format where you should play those things and figure out how to play against those things. Meanwhile, in Brawl, Strip Mine, Mana Drain, Chrome Mox, and Ancient Tomb got shot in the back of the head, out behind the bike shed, and you know what? Good. I wasn't 100% like on the train of these cards need to go, but in seeing them gone, I don't look at that list and think, oh shucks, that's a shame. All of these cards were either, okay, there's two camps here. Ancient Tomb and Chrome Mox accelerated the game in a way that was obnoxious because they are both playable in every single Brawl deck. I mean, there are other cards that are playable in every single Brawl deck, like Mox Amber, for example, because you have access to a legend in the command zone, except for the colorless one, I guess, but Mox Amber is significantly worse than Chrome Mox because you have to have your legend in play to use it. Chrome Mox is a legacy playable modern banned card for a very good reason. By playable, I mean played in decks. Chrome Mox is incredibly powerful compared to even Mox Amber. So the homogenizing effect of these ramp spells, these acceleration spells, or lands in the case of Ancient Tomb, I think it is good to get rid of them because they were just auto-included in every deck. On top of auto-included in every deck, Strip Mine's the same thing, except it's pushed to the like nth degree when you add green and Icetel Explorers around excavators and similar stuff like that. And the game's just evolved being based around strip mine, which I think is okay in Timeless because it's a much more cutthroat, high power level format where show and telling a big threat on turn 2 is a thing that happens regularly, where Brawl isn't really that. Brawl isn't Commander. People go and think it's Commander. Really, it's dual Commander. It's closer to CDH than it's closer to EDH. But I still don't think strip mine's healthy there. And then lastly, Mana Drain. Yeah, look, they pointed out how like the card isn't necessarily a really high win rate card unless it's in your opening hand and then your win rate goes up by 10%, which really, to me, sounds like it's a win rate increasing card. Mana Drain is brutal because when you hit someone's 3-drop or 4-drop and then you untap and cast something absolutely huge by comparison, it puts you so far ahead that it's not really worth continuing to play. Again, in formats where everyone is doing ludicrous busted shit, like in Timeless, I get it. Brawl isn't quite that format, and the variance element is worse. Like in Timeless, everyone's playing 4-ofs with the best cards, except for Demonic Chewer, I think. And thus, the games are less swingy, shall we say. Where in Brawl, you got to remember that if the opponent drew their strip mine alongside their Icetel Explorer and you did not, you are now up shit creek without a paddle. Again, I think all these bans are great. Like, generally, overall, this is quite a good set of bans. Like, it does things to all the formats that you would expect right now. Modern is perfectly fine, didn't need it, and Legacy's needed a shake-up for a while, at least from the vibe check I get when talking to people who play Legacy way more than I do now. For those of you who are new here, by the way, I used to play a lot of fucking Legacy. Anyway, my voice is completely fucked. I hope that was some valid input. This is pretty good. I do think, to be honest, they could have apologised a bit more for leaving Standard to rot for 6 months. Like, if you wonder why Standard can't fire at shops and Commander's your prominent format, look to how it's being handled like this, I guess. But ultimately, they are making changes for the future, which I think is a positive. I've been Vince, also known as PleasantKenobi on the internet. Fuck, are my throat sore, and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.